Okay, welcome back, everyone, to a conversation about design. My guest today needs no introduction. Chris, it's just a pleasure to have you. I know you promised you would do this with me probably 18 months ago, and I'm just glad that we could make this happen.
Here we are. I'm super excited to do this. I'm super excited to do this with you, and thank you for your flexibility.
Yeah, no problem. And today's my birthday, by the way.
Oh,
So
wow. Happy
yeah,
birthday.
it's just turned midnight. So literally, you're the first person to greet me and say happy birthday to me. And then after this, I'm going to head to sleep because it'll be around whenever time it will be in the morning. But yeah, just super excited to have you here and to talk to you about the future of design education, which is a topic on the forefront of my mind at the moment.
Let's do it.
Um, so you're all over the world. You're inspiring. You're teaching. You're coaching. I met so many people when we had you over here in London. Let me start with a big question. Where do you see all of this going in, say, 5 years? The kind of stuff that you're doing in education, where do you see this in, say, 5 years?
The future of education.
Yes.
I'm going to give you this answer in two ways. I'm going to start with the more pragmatic, perhaps pessimistic point of view, which is not much has changed. And that would be the saddest part. I see tuition ever increasing. There's inflation and there's talks of a recession. So the world is in a fragile place right now. A
Mhm.
couple of wars going on, and we're not sure if the environment is getting any better. So we're having longer, hotter summers, wetter winters, colder. And so that doesn't look very promising to me. And the reason why I give you the pragmatic answer first is because large institutions, established institutions, are the least likely to make a change.
Right.
And it's been well taught, or it's well documented and talked about, in that we're inheriting an education system that's hundreds of years old, mostly established through the British Empire. And we're still doing that today. And it was designed to create human machines, people to swap out as replaceable parts.
Mhm.
This is not to take into consideration any of the technological changes that have happened in the last 30 to 40 years: personal computers, the internet, and now AI. And so schools are very slow to adapt. Now, I am an optimist, so
Mhm.
I'll tell you what I hope is going to happen,
Yep.
knowing very well that it's going to need a lot of people to make this happen. People who are united by cause, who are motivated by more than just profit, who challenge the status quo. And in that future, I think a lot of the brick and mortar schools that exist today become hybrid learning spaces designed to have more communal experiences that leverage digital technologies, asynchronous learning that is adaptive and also rewards teachers for the contributions that they have, that they, instead of filling in slots and babysitting people and pushing through a curriculum so people get degrees, they really create active learning spaces. And people who experience college in person really get to enrich in their experience by meeting people, by building lifelong friends, having mentors, and also mentoring other people themselves. I would love to see that world exist. So we're on paths. I'm not sure which one's going to win, but I'm hopeful that the latter of the two does.
And I want to pick up on something that you just said, because the adaptability or the adaptive approach, I think, is so critical. So obviously, I agree. Like and I'm seeing it here in the UK universities, they're just really struggling to keep up to make that change that's needed, especially in the pace of technological kind of advances that are happening each week, each month. And they can't adjust their curriculum. They don't have the personnel that can then go out and teach these individuals as well. So I think there's a huge opportunity with that, with these smaller institutions to kind of do that, or the more focused academies. When we talk about adaptability, now let's talk about what does that mean for the individual. So the individual that you're working with, for example, now, what does that mean in terms of having to adapt, say, 5 years from now? What skill sets do you think they need to have?
The skill sets of the 21st century creative thinker knowledge worker is very different than the 20th century.
Hmm.
I think they have a good sense of history in music, art, architecture, photography, because in these large language models that we're using, language becomes a very critical part. The way you communicate, how you phrase things, your reference points are very, very important.
Hmm.
That's going to also require critical thinking and your ability to ask really good questions, because if the machine already has the answer, answers become very cheap and not very valuable. And I've
Right.
said it for many years prior to AI becoming a really big thing, is that questions are greater than answers, because
Mm,
questions lead to further investigation. It unlocks personal development, and just being able to query things on Google and now via the many different uh, AI engines that exist,
yeah.
to be able to ask it a question and continue to question the answers that you get, I think lead to a much deeper place of learning, meaning, and of value.
Nice. And where do you think like cross-cultural empathy or kind of ethical kind of decisions comes into play?
Can you give me an example of what you're thinking about there?
So, for example, we're now living in a space where you could use these AI tools or kind of things like Lovable or Bolt to kind of build platforms quicker than ever that can scale across continents globally quicker than ever as well. One of the things that I think is missing at the moment is for people to kind of think on that kind of global design thinking level, not just thinking what matters to me here in London, for example, but across the world. These tools could be used in not only teams, you could build with teams in Tokyo, Stockholm, Dubai as well, but the platforms are going to can scale across the world quicker than ever. So, do you think there's something there that people need to start picking up on pretty quickly?
I think it's a trend that's been happening for the last couple of decades, where globalization is a real thing. The world is becoming smaller because of how
Mm,
interconnected we are. If you create a piece of content or product, you don't have local buyers anymore. You have international buyers. So
mhm,
companies and then therefore brands have this tremendous potential reach. But adapting and localizing for each market has been very, very difficult.
mm,
Now made much easier through the use of AI. Here's an example. I do a sales workshop, I do a business workshop, but what I can't anticipate is what each culture, how they're going to respond to an idea, what their long held beliefs are, and what kind of economic opportunities there are, and what the climate is like working with clients. But I can use an LLM to give me a sense of what their sentiment is and to know ahead of time what the objections might be so I can adapt my workshop for each region. This is really important. AI is also giving us the ability to localize content, to translate it into native languages. So we can change the content itself and we can
mhm.
potentially create 15 or 50 different websites that, depending on where you're logging in from, depending on the IP, um, then we can send them a very different experience that addresses them in a way that they feel seen, heard, and understood. And I
Yeah,
think that's way more feasible than it ever has been.
yeah. And so when we now talk about kind of the ability for us to have all of these tools in our hand, we can build stuff quicker than ever. We've talked about that. What about ethical decisions, ethical impact? Can we versus should we? Where do you think that falls into play over the next few years?
I think, like all things, when we're on the frontier, there's a lot of lawlessness, a
Mm,
lot of crazy things that are going to happen in the spirit of innovation, also in terms of chasing capital. We get
mhm,
that. And I think eventually it starts to settle down, hopefully.
yeah,
And I think I've seen this many, many times before. There's a gold rush, and eventually the shanty towns that are built, the lawlessness that happens, eventually becomes the city of tomorrow. And
yeah,
I think there's something like that. First, there's the fervor of excitement of like
mm,
new opportunities and chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And when that all dies down, then eventually it settles down. Now, in recent history, we've seen a lot of movement in the NFT space. There was a
mhm,
lot of excitement. A lot of people made money. A lot of people lost money, and then there was nothing, and then it fizzled out. And then right after that, there was this thing called the metaverse, and then there was a
yeah,
lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and that
yeah,
died out even faster.
yeah.
And a lot of people lost money there. I don't know if you own any digital real estate in the metaverse, but it's probably worth nothing.
No, 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 and there's a Snoop, track where I think he starts the track with asking how much some of his land is worth in the metaverse, and I think someone says 3.5 million or 4.5 million, and "Where did I buy it for?" "Oh, I bought it for 200,000." I always think, I wonder if they could go ask him that question now, how much that land would be worth in the metaverse. I'd be curious to
Well,
see
what
what
I
Snoop would do.
safe bet not worth very much at
Yeah,
all.
exactly.
Way below what he paid for sure.
Yeah. Um Let's go back to the kind of the adaptive university kind of question. So there's a whole bunch of skill. Obviously, I agree. Like there's so much happening. There's a race. We need to kind of maybe sometimes take a step back and calm down. Where do you see opportunities in education? So obviously, if the institutions are slow to react, because that's creating opportunities or a chance for movement in the space, where do you think that that currently sits?
Well, as long as there are young people with the need to learn and to
Mm,
acquire skills and to do personal development, learning never goes out of trend. It's just the delivery vehicle, the price in which we pay, and what format it takes. I think we can see these things happen. There's a period in time when in America you can get a decent paying white collar job
mm,
because the corporations would pay you to learn stuff. So the degree was important but not
yeah.
critical. And then there was a phase where if you don't have a college degree, they're not going to consider you. And then the
Mm,
bar keeps ratcheting up to a master's degree or a PhD to get the best positions. And then the last 10 years, the largest corporations in the tech space said we will no longer have a requirement as a degree. And they're
mm,
understanding that many of their founders, many of the richest people in the tech space actually dropped out of school.
yeah.
And so they're creating a double standard, which doesn't make sense. And you
Yeah.
want to attract the brightest minds. And sometimes someone with a non traditional, atypical background will be the person who's going to contribute to
Mhm.
your company the most because they have new ideas, there's new thinking, there's a fresh perspective. And this person could be 14 or they could be 44. We shouldn't let these normal ways of evaluating
Yeah.
talent. And I think degrees are a shorthand for something, and it's been over indexed as to what that thing is. It means that you know how to follow rules, that you put in the work to achieve something, but
Mm.
what you got from that is hard to measure. And I think there's more creative ways, more accurate ways to measure what it is that you're able to contribute.
I want to ask you a question because I've been contemplating around in the education space. Obviously, we do a lot of work with, I would say, 24 to 40-year-olds. We do a lot of work with corporates, and a lot of it is around design thinking, service design, process reimagination, things like that. I've been really thinking that it seems like a lot of people are getting left behind to the secondary teachers, secondary school teachers. I don't feel like they're getting the opportunity to kind of, and things are moving so fast. The students that are at a high school level are picking up these tools and using them much more advanced than the kind of the teachers probably are. Do you think that there's a shift needed in how we're preparing secondary school teachers? And obviously, you've spoken about the value of a degree. So the layer below that, what are your thoughts on secondary school kind of teaching for the future?
You're talking about high school and possibly junior high, right?
Correct, correct. I would say high school, high school.
Let's focus on that then.
Yeah.
So we're talking about grades 9 through 12.
Yes.
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that, Amit, but I can look at that from the lens of a parent. So
Okay.
I have two boys. They're aged 21 and soon to be 19, and they have very different experiences with school, but both unique and tailored for them. My oldest is a very high performing, very intelligent, tested like 1%. And he went to school for gifted kids, a very specialized private school, and everyone there is borderline genius or beyond. It's the kind of place where the real life Doogie Howser might have went to school,
Right. Yeah.
where they're taking college level courses when they're 15. And that's a very special place. And I think that's beautiful.
Mm,
So once he got out from that school, then he went to a boarding school on the East Coast, a pretty elite boarding school, high school that's a college prep high school.
mm.
And the level of work and professionalism and the study habits they developed there, I was told, is beyond what they're going to experience in college. And so
Okay.
now that he's going to university, he finds the work to be too easy and the students
Mm,
not as focused. And so I think that was a really great way to prepare him for something in life. And he got the rare opportunity that most people don't get, which
correct.
is to live on his own and to mature at his own rate and have that level of independence. And so we see that in him.
Mm,
My youngest, on the other hand, having gone to many years of private school, we elected for him to go to a public art high school, one of
okay.
the top in the country. And he had a totally different experience. I loved it because it was free, and what he got to experience was really tailored towards his creative desires and instincts and the way he moves through the world. And so
Right.
naturally, he was able to leverage that to get into a very highly regarded art and design college. And so both took a very different path. He
Mm,
stayed home. He's living with us now. The other one hasn't been home since high school. And
right.
so that's kind of a unique experience. But I'm very fortunate to be able to have that experience for
Yeah.
both my children. It makes me wonder of the parents in the United States, especially what kind of education their kids are getting.
Yep.
who their kids are being surrounded by, and oftentimes it's just whatever's local and convenient.
Yep.
Unfortunately, many schools, including high school, are some kind of state run um, childcare system.
Mm.
So it's like parents have to work, and so we create schools so the parents don't have to worry about their children,
Yep.
and they go and do things. What they do, what they learn, what they get from it, it doesn't seem to be all that. And
Mm.
I remember going through to high school myself. It's just you just check the boxes. That's what you really need to
Yep.
do. And I wasn't ever inspired. I put in minimal effort to get the best grade I could without working harder than that. And luckily, though, despite all that stuff, I had a handful of teachers who really saw me as a human being,
Yep.
who afforded me certain opportunities to learn and to grow, but not in the traditional sense. All my favorite classes weren't in the STEM, if you will.
Yep.
I wasn't really interested in that at all.
I think this is something that I've has really kind of I'd say touched me in the last couple of months is what's happening at that high school level. We do work with various colleges around the UK, and there are market differences. And like you said, there's private schools here. My two daughters go to private school. They're very young, so they've got a long way to go. But I've gone to some other schools. I'm just like, well, hold on a second. Like maybe it does feel like a checklist, or it does feel like they're just it's like a kind of a days a kind of nursery, not a nursery, but a place where the parents can just say, okay, my kid's there, they're occupied during the day, and I'm off and busy being work. But the access to creative, to design, to just ideation, all of that just seems to be lacking. I had it growing up in Canada and I loved it, and I think that's kind of fueled me kind of moving forward. So I feel like there's something there that I would love to tackle, because it's before the degree, and obviously a lot of people are questioning the value of the degree because of the cost, and they're questioning, oh wait, are these universities moving fast enough? And is am I going to get something when I come out of it? Of course, anytime you buy something, am I getting value for that degree when I come out of it? So I feel like I want to focus a little bit more in the future on that high school level. Um, how I'm going to do that and figure out how to kind of engage the teachers is a big question. But I also think that that is such a great opportunity. And like you said, with your oldest son, that you spotted that, and then you nurtured it. It sounded like you put him in the right environment. And I'm hoping that we can do that with the teachers at secondary school and nurture them to then go back and help them fuel the next generation.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment out here to credit the person responsible for that, and that's my wife.
Mm.
I am not the chief home officer. She doesn't like that title, but she is. When she had heard about a program or school for gifted kids,
Mm.
she said, "Let's look into this." And we went to tour the school, and Otto applied for it, and he got in. And that's really all credit due to my wife. And I
Mm.
just supported it, and I signed the checks, and that's as much as I do with this. So credit to my wife for that.
Nice. And so a question. This is a question for you. Is do you think that the people that you're working with and you're teaching and you're training, et cetera, and doing so much great work with, do you think that spark is lit into them at that high school level, or does it come a little bit later on?
See, I think the spark started much earlier than that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it was beaten out of us, and so we forget about that, and we start to conform. I think the longer you're in a state-run program, the less likely you are to remember who you are and things that make you different and unique, because it's a system designed to weed out anomalies.
Mm.
It's teaching to the median and not to the edge cases. So people who are really smart and creative, or people who are slow and possibly neurodivergent, or have some other form of learning disability or disorder,
Mm.
they're left out. They're on the fringe and they're not generally rewarded. So when we got to tour schools, the ones that really sang to our heart, which struck a chord in all of us, which really resonated, was we tailor our school to not only the individual, but we also take into consideration their gender,
Mm.
because boys like to learn a certain way and girls like to learn a different way. Girls can sit in class, according to this one school, for long periods of time, be super focused and attentive, while boys need to get around and move and do things because they have a different energy. And to try to treat both like that would be disruptive to one or the other.
Mm.
Boys are going to volunteer, they're going to run to the board, and it's okay. And where girls will sit back and be quiet. So we need to design programs for different ways in which we learn. And our duty as parents is to find the right school that is the right mix for your child. I mean, I think that's a big burden, especially if you're resource deprived,
Yep.
whether you don't have the help or the financial means to be able to do this, or perhaps you live in a place where you have one of two options. Living in Los Angeles, there are tons of private schools and public schools. So we have the ability to really select the right school for our child. And
Mhm.
I do want to put that out there so that people understand that we're in a very privileged place, that
Yep.
we have lots of options and we have the means to support our children. And that is not something that's afforded to everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, that's, it's the same over here in London. There's options depending on your income and et cetera. And I think I just feel like there's a widening gap that needs to be kind of closed back down. And that's not to say that, these opportunities that you're clearly able to kind of put your children in, it's great, but we don't want to leave behind. We've got to start thinking about kind of the inclusive kind of approach to all of this, and not leave this huge generation, because there's sparks in those young kids as well, that just sometimes it's just like you said, it's beaten out of them, and sometimes they don't get it back, and maybe they discover it too late. We are living in a world, however, and this is kind of, the kind of stuff that exactly what you're doing. You're re-enabling people, you're empowering people, you're giving them that opportunity to kind of reshape their career. And we're living in a world where you may do that 5 times in your entire career. You might have to go back and constantly upskill, as well. If I was to put you on the spot and say, if you could change at a high level the education system to focus more on creative strategy, ideation, what are like some of the key changes you would make?
Okay, that is a really big question. Point me in a direction. I'll try to unleash
Okay,
my crazy
so
thoughts on that.
there's no you don't need to think about the segments we have right now. So junior, high school, degree, masters, that take away all of that. You get a blank slate. It's a very big question.
Okay.
How would you restructure it?
Number one, I would incorporate play into a lot of things.
Hmm.
I would try to do integrated learning. So we're not learning discrete skills. We're not studying science and foreign language. We're learning science and foreign language and chemistry all at the same time. That's kind of really important. Number two or three here, I would love to incorporate some kind of emotional programming so that we understand how
Hmm.
to process and use our emotions and not to bury them and not to talk about them at all. I met a woman who's really very, very passionate about this, to teach people how to process emotions, how to regulate them, and to be fully functioning humans by acknowledging that they exist and using them in strategic moments, and then being able to understand sometimes what you're feeling isn't real. um, I would like to introduce art and integrated with play and science and chemistry and engineering, all that kind of stuff, so
Hmm.
that I believe, and art can be a lot of different things. It could be sculpture, it could be mixed media things, it could be digital media, it could be playing an instrument or learning how to sing. I think that's
Yeah.
really important. Integrating public speaking and communication skills as a core,
Hmm.
one of the core pillars of the education. The ability to research and think on your own, so less structured assignments and more collaborative play and research based, where there's not one answer, there's just many kinds of answers, and
Hmm.
helping kids to learn that way. um, I forget his name now, Sujita Mitra or something like that. He has this concept called Soul, the self-organized learning environment, SOLE, and I really love that. So teachers aren't teachers; they're facilitators. They're
Right.
really there to introduce a problem and encourage you along the way. And most of what you do is through your own exploration. And the kids are incredibly bright. They can learn a lot more than what a textbook can tell them.
Yeah.
And they're learning an important life skill.
Yeah.
I would include travel and in experiencing different cultures, not from the point of view of a video or a book, but to actually be immersed in different cultures. And I
Mm.
think this is really cool. And I wish there was some kind of funding that was available to children so that it wasn't a financial burden for parents. So growing up, I grew up a lower middle class, and there were opportunities to participate in field trips, but the immigrant mindset is, we don't need to pay for that, you don't need to go. And I was
Mm.
devoid of those experiences, and I think it could have shaped my worldview earlier on, and
Yeah.
also to form deeper relationships with those people. Because we know when we travel with people, when we experience different locations, we
Mm.
get to know who our true friends are and the ones who
Yep.
are just pretending to be our friend. And I would have loved that. I think that would have been really cool. And I would love to have some kind of program where people are learning about media, where we can see how we're being, I guess, nudged or manipulated by different forms of news outlets, so that we're more critical in our thinking and questioning what is real and what is not real, and doing independent research, validating sources so that we can
Mm.
confirm to the best of my ability, I understand this is real. Because otherwise, the general public is too easily manipulated and fall for different persuasive arguments, rhetoric, or marketing
Mm.
tactics. We have to have an informed public that is critical in its thinking, so that we shape our cities and our governments in a way that reflect our cultures and our belief systems.
I really like I want to pick up on one particular point, the soul, and I need to go back. I need to read this. I need to go back and research on this, because I think that's one thing that, if I look back at my schooling, I grew up in Canada. I loved growing up in Canada, and it had a lot of those. Just living outside of Toronto had so many of those great outdoor space. So many kind of different places to kind of go and travel and explore. We went to America a lot when we were young. Um, Very diverse, a lot of people first generation, second generation to Canada. So it's just an amazing place to grow up. I think it's changed now, but there was a couple of particular programs that we did around robotics, for example. So probably grade 9, grade 10. And that really just, it unlocked a lot of creativity and a lot of kind of freedom to test things, but we were guided by mentors from local companies. So we had a mentor from IBM, for example, kind of helping us, build this robot for this robotics competition. But it gave you that spark. It gave you that understanding that these are how things are built in the real world. You're guided by a mentor. And again, not every school is going to have access to that, but that was enabled to fight by that school, and it sticks with you. Those are the things you remember. Those are the things that actually stick with you. Yeah.
One last thing I thought about was, when I run a workshop,
Mm.
I try and create breakout rooms where each breakout room represents a different point of interest, and the people who are in the main room decide which room do you want to go into. I would love for something like this to happen multiple times, where maybe there are 4 assemblies that happen,
Yeah.
where you're going to have a NASA scientist, maybe a professional athlete, a musician or artist, some other fourth person,
Mm. Mm.
and then students are allowed to take a moment, hear their pitches, and then choose which room they want to go into. And it should be designed for the general interests of the group, not find fringe topics that no one's interested in, or
Mm.
everyone's interested in one, because then you're just funneling everybody into the same thing. To have 4
Yeah.
equally intriguing, compelling points of interest, so that people can say, whoa, I would love to go to all, but I'm going to pick this one. And
Yeah.
do this multiple times, time and time again, because how are we to expect our children to pick what kind of career path, what's
Mm.
lighting them up, when they're not even introduced to what's possible? So I
Yeah.
would think year one, whatever grade level this is, we're doing these kind of assemblies multiple times, like maybe
Mm.
one every week. So by the time the first semester's done, they've been introduced now to like 14 different professions and from different points of view. And we're bringing in maybe not A level, but at least B level talent, so that
Yep.
you're not going to meet Beyonce, but you might meet an up and coming artist who's doing
Yep. Yep.
well, who's on the come up. I think that would be really phenomenal
Mm.
to be able to hear from them what's going on. And how awesome would that be if you were the
Yeah.
person who was chosen to speak to the kids, and they chose to listen to you, and you
Yeah.
get to pour into them. And I think then it becomes really interesting.
Yeah.
And one of the problems that we have, at least here in this country in America, is that when you don't see someone who looks like you, sounds like you, or comes
Mm.
from your background or has your values, we say, well, that's cool for them, but that could never happen for me.
Right.
And so there's a disproportionate number of people who go into different fields just because they're overrepresented. Whereas some fields have no one in it because, well, I've never seen anybody like me do it before.
Mm.
And if we want to change those norms, and if we believe in this idea, which I believe in,
Yeah.
is that a, pro, a plurality of divergent voices within fields who are equally talented and qualified makes the field better.
So just picking up on that last point then. So now let's move away because obviously I think a lot of our focus is on say junior high school, maybe even younger. How do you think that now translates to the people that are already in their career? So for example, if you're thinking about the 30-year-old creative who is facing a little bit of self-doubt, the world's moving fast, what do you think that person could be doing or what could we be doing as educators to keep that person's or reignite that person's spark?
Well, I think that person already knows something's going on.
Mm,
They're not finding fulfillment in what they're doing,
mm,
and it's reflected in their paycheck, their job title, their responsibilities, their ability to move up the chain, and they know something is off. They're feeling stressed, they're feeling burnt out, and pretty much not appreciated. And that's a horrible thing for a human being to experience. And so I think it's called adult education,
mhm.
where people can get some additional training. I think every place of work should invest in their employees so that they're continuing to work on personal development, so that there is a budget for this. It doesn't have to be a ton. It could be
Mm,
$1,000 or $2,000 every year. It's use it or lose it. And so then people are motivated to try to invest in something, and they have to be smart what they're picking because it's not an unlimited budget. And so then they can pick programs where it's done in an asynchronous way. So after hours on the weekend, they can develop a new skill, a new hobby that then they can bring back into their office place. And let's not make it a punitive thing. Let's not make it extra work where you take a course and then you have to report on the course, and just say it's free money for you to use as education. Wouldn't that be better to help stave
mm,
off burnout or people quitting? Oftentimes, people look at these kinds of programs as expenses versus, well, we could save a lot of money because whenever we lose an employee,
yep,
it costs the company a lot of money. The
yep,
training, the ramp down, the ramp up, IT's getting involved,
yep.
equipment, office space, passwords. There's a whole chain of things that happen, but
Mm,
oftentimes we just accept that as part of normal business. And if we to take into true cost of losing a qualified person who's shown up every single day, that cost is much greater than we think. Instead of investing a few thousand
yep,
bucks, I'm sorry, instead of looking at it as an expense of a few thousand bucks, look at it as how you contribute to the bottom line of your company.
yeah. And there's something you've mentioned there that again that I just want to dive a little bit deeper on because I really like the idea that they should be able to kind of almost have a bit of freedom of what they spend that money on. It's a bucket of money, $1 or $2,000. Spend it on. It doesn't have to be directly attributable to their work. It could be something that just re-energizes them. I recently spoke to a company. We were talking about design leadership and this time that we need to have to play around with tools because tools are popping up all the time. People are like, well, how do I find time? I don't have time in my work. I don't have the freedom. We don't have access to them. So we'll find a side project. Find a side project that you can do. So I love playing golf. So I said, okay, I'm going to use Lovable. Someone sparked it. I was on LinkedIn. Somebody had written something about it. I said, you know what? I'm going to go on Lovable, use prompt engineering, and I'm going to figure out a way to add AI to it so I can upload a video of my swing so it gives me feedback and gives me an instructional plan. It's a side project, something that I could just dabble in 15 minutes a day and it builds up over time. Do you think that what are your thoughts on side projects and unleashing the creativity in adults and adult education? Because I don't think a lot of people bother with them anymore.
Yeah, this is a difficult one. Again, I think this idea of the 40-hour work week is an old idea.
Mm,
And that if you give people 4 days to do the work, they'll do the work of 5 days in four. And you say, what should you do with the last day?
yeah.
Well, why don't you work on a hobby?
Mm,
Why don't you work on anything? Spend more time with your kids or build a
yeah.
shed or something, because I think we need to account for that. And I think if I can make this extension, that creativity expands or contracts based on a timeline or a deadline.
Mm,
If you give someone 3 weeks to work on a painting, they'll take 3 weeks. If you give them 3 hours, it'll take 3 hours.
yep.
And time spent on doing something isn't always isn't a great indicator of the quality of the work. Sometimes we work best under tight deadlines and constraints.
Mm,
And I find that true to be in most cases when it comes to creativity. So by extension, I think some tasks, not manual labor, because
yep.
manual labor takes time to do right. But other than that, like thinking work, creative work can shrink or expand to fill a certain timeline. So
Yep.
if we were to say, why don't we try to get everything done in 4 days instead of five, and then try to spend that time and do something with ourselves? And I think people will be happier and they'll work harder Like the way we manage our team is we don't track anybody's time anymore. We
Mm.
just say, what are the jobs that need to be done and by when, and people are left to their devices to do them.
Right.
So whether it takes them 2 hours or 200 hours is irrelevant to me. Do your job, do it well, and no
Mm.
one ever questions it. Where we run into problems when people don't do the work. And so
Yep.
there has to be a high degree of trust. And on
Mm.
both sides, we trust you to do the work. And then you trust us to take care of you and look after you, that we're not going to pile
Yep.
on more work just because you're getting the work done. This is kind of critical.
Yep.
It's a relationship built on trust and productivity, not one on micromanaging and clocking in and
Hmm.
clocking out. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's a very old way of measuring productivity, and very not a very accurate one.
Yeah, it's and kind of going back to that the points you were making around the training. It sounds like it's a cultural shift that organization needs to make, right? So shifting away from that kind of micromanagement or micro accountability tracking to actually we're going to give you these tasks, make sure you get them done, and if you do, and we build and see that happening, that fifth day can be yours to either work on a side project, to have the freedom or creativity, or take your training days or whatever it is, which is definitely going to energize somebody for sure.
Yeah. And there's an analog here with video games. In
Mm,
open world video games, which is more popular today than these linear
mm,
adventures that you go on, there's the main quest and there's a lot of side quests. And the side quests become much more interesting, or as interesting as the main quest. So
mm,
on your way to slaying the dragon, you have to go and clear a cave of trolls or help villagers defend
yeah.
something. And I like doing those, and it just becomes kind of like super interesting. So if we look
Mm,
at the side quest as an important part to the overall narrative, side quests being
mm,
side projects,
yeah.
hobbies, interests, those kinds of things, as creating a more holistic approach to personal development, then I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Plus, if you like to play golf, one day you're on your own time and doing
Mm,
personal development and you're playing golf and you meet a really interesting person who shares an idea with you, then you're like, wow, I need to bring this back to the team and say, hey, I learned something new and different today. That does not happen if you don't have that kind of time. Now,
absolutely.
recently, I've just come back from South by Southwest. So this is dating this episode right now. I was spending some time in Austin and I got to meet some really interesting people that weren't part of the main quest. South by South by Southwest is the main quest, but I got to do a whiteboard fireside chat with
Mm,
my buddy Tim Francis. I also got to hang out with the Samcart people and hear from some of their top performing companies, and they shared their insights. They shared what they're doing that works. Now, not all of it's good for me, but some of it is, and it just takes one big idea to change
yeah.
the trajectory of where you're going and what you're going to do.
And just before, and I completely agree. And I just before we started recording, I had that moment a couple of weeks ago in Dubai when I was out there speaking at that conference, and I think you had just been there a couple of weeks before that. And it was a weekend where I got so energized by the people, by just the conversations, by just realizing the opportunities that are out there, stuff that I need to be going out and doing and chasing. I like to go there because that particular place, because it just sparks so much in me. So like a 3-4 day break, you can relax. I can play golf, but I can go and meet people, and I just come back. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. I've got my plan for the year now, and then I have to go away and execute it. And in fact, that it was when on the flight back where I started thinking about this potential platform for secondary or high school teachers. I said, actually, this is maybe something that I need to be kind of going and focusing on building and making. And not and another key thing is, I think, as part of that culture, not over engineering things. So these side projects don't need to be elaborate, super over engineered things. They can grow over time, but also the satisfaction that somebody who's not feeling satisfaction in their job can see of something else growing along the way. I think it's a fascinating kind of watch to kind of see that happen.
One of my professors at Art Center, I hope I'm citing the right person here. His
Mm,
name is Lou Danziger, and he would often say, if you want to change the way you create, change your tools. So if you use a
mm,
drawing with marker, change it to a pen to a pencil, or just change the tools in which you use. I thought that was pretty cool, and it's very real, and it's true.
mm,
But one of the best ways to change your mindset or your POV is to change your environment. So you walked into a whole new world. In Dubai,
mm,
it's very different. It's a desert landscape filled with shiny metal and glass
mm,
skyscrapers. The culture is different. The food is different. The language is different. Their
yeah,
customs are so different. So you're temporarily kind of warping to another place and it
mm,
changes you. And I think that's one of the best things. There was an ad, I forget who it's for, but it says travel changes you. The
mm,
asterisk is if you let it.
mm,
Travel changes you. So if you immerse yourself in different cultures, I think the the probability of your whole lens changing, or to some degree, is very high if you're open to that.
Right. Means I need to get back to Dubai. I need to plot my next trip after this.
Or Japan, or Singapore, or anywhere
Japan is another.
else.
It's just amazing. Again, that just I was there. I know that you're planning something. I saw it up there, and I was there a couple of years ago, and just in Tokyo. And obviously, they had all the different wards that are so different from each other. So you can just explore all the different wards and such a good grasp of just that city, which is a true metropolis as well. But again, a place where I left after I think I was there for 10 days, and I think, wow, I feel so fulfilled. I feel so energized, and I feel like there's so much more I can go and achieve. It's a weird sense, but I just kind of walked away thinking, ooh, I've just kind of had a realignment of my sense of purpose. Um, I want to close with a final question. How do you see what you're doing shifting over the next couple of years in terms of delivery, in terms of maybe format? Just because things are changing, there's so much uncertainty, of course, as you mentioned at the beginning. I think there's also a huge level of excitement and so much happening in technology and creativity. I would just love to get your thoughts on what you think might change in terms of the way that you are currently doing things.
Okay. I think I'm very firm about where I'd like this whole journey to end, which is
Okay.
to disrupt the educational model that exists today. But
Okay.
I'm also very loose about how to get there. So I'm not married to a 5 year plan. I'm married to the next 5 weeks and 5 months plan.
Hmm.
And then when things work or don't work, I make a lot of adjustments along the way. I never want to fall in love with one particular plan, because when that plan doesn't work and you're in love with it, you will take the ship down to pursue that, because you've made such a commitment to yourself and to others that this is what we're doing. So I have general directions, but I can tell you kind of what the current 5 month looks like. Number one, we have to get back into in-person learning experiences. So I'm looking to purchase a building to do hybrid learning environments where we can bring real people in and teach live via workshops, firesides, whiteboards, Q&A, that kind of thing, because the energy is different. When I'm around real people, they have real problems and challenges, and I like to respond to them. And as one metric, if you look at the videos that are the highest performing on our channel, it's very rarely I'm just talking to myself on a piece of glass that I'm presenting to no one. Because that conversation, frankly, is very boring. It's not interesting to me, and it's probably not interesting to our audience. But the ones that spark the most dialogue are when I'm full throated trying to teach somebody and we're going back and forth. They're arguing, they're being stubborn, whether it's with Mo, who's a friend, and arguing about price, or my other friend, Jung, who's arguing with me about how much should the logo cost. Those are the videos that pop because there's an emotional quotient to it, and people want to see how you respond to difficult people. Sometimes the person playing against me is the difficult person, and sometimes I'm the difficult person. But either way, there's friction and it's more reflective of real life. So I need to get back into real space. And since the pandemic, I've moved my office. I'm sorry, I moved my house. So that's a little bit too far from my office. So I need one that's closer to me, because I don't want that to be the friction that creates that doesn't allow me to make content. But the benefit of this is not only having in-person experiences, but is to be able to record that and transmit that to the world. And I think people are going to love that. And I also want to use it as an incubator space to explore different workshops and content. I noticed that comedians have a thing. There are small clubs and some very, very tiny venues where they can get to practice their craft, and they're able to practice and develop new jokes, new ideas, new delivery formats. But there isn't so much a place like that for a lot of other people. So I was thinking something like a speakers bureau where certain individuals are invited to drop in any time of the week. And on a given Thursday night, you have a small audience and you can come up with unfinished keynotes, scribbled notes on index cards. You can just work on your material, and the audience gets to see something new, raw, and rough. And I think there's something beautiful about that. I don't currently know of any place that exists like that, where people who aspire to be better public speakers and communicators have a place where they can work on that, unless you're a comedian. And I think that's kind of important. Now, and on that note, I continue to be excited about taking the workshops to the world. It's like a lot of people can't come to us, so I will come to you. And I think it's an interesting business model, and one that's going to be very hard to be replaced by AI. What I'm trying to do is build businesses that are AI proof. And having said that, a lot of the things that we're going to be doing and offering people are enhanced by AI. There was a term that I learned recently at one of these mastermind retreats was AI accelerator. So instead of worrying about what the AI is going to do, incorporate the AI prompt and workflow into what you're teaching. So students have to worry about, well, this is irrelevant, isn't it? No, it's not, because we've integrated and we're going to teach you the core concept. And we're also going to give you the prompt to accelerate this process for you. And so I think that's really important. So shout out to Molly Mahone, who shared that with me. And it's like, yeah, I like that term, AI accelerator. And what else are we doing here? Oh, and then I want to curate experiences, a walk with me, travel with me thing where we're going to different parts of the world, like Japan, or to go out in the wilderness and go on a fishing trip together. I've started this, and it's just a little baby idea that's growing into something, and I'm really happy and delighted to know that some of my very influential and successful friends are reaching out to me in the DM saying, "Count me in on that trip, but just don't make it public." I'm like, "That's
Oh,
cool."
cool.
So when people show up, they're like, "Whoa, I didn't know XYZ was going to be here." It's like, "Yeah, I could not tell you." Because that's
Yeah,
not part of the marketing. The marketing is come travel with me, have an experience, and walk away a different person. So I'm kind of excited about where that's going to go. Who knows where it will lead, but for now, I'm excited about it.
yeah. Sounds like people and places is definitely at the kind of the core of all of that as well. But also pen, like, and I actually recently did another podcast with somebody who's in the design education space, working with a lot of companies, and pen, people, places, it just kept coming back, and it sounds like that in person kind of delivery is so important. I love the idea of the space where people can come and say, "Well, I'm doing a keynote at this place. Can I just come and practice it? Can I get some feedback on it from some light people?" Because you're right. Where do you get an opportunity? A lot of times you're sitting on a plane or you're sitting in a coffee shop. You're doing it. You're thinking through it yourself. You never actually get there and try it out. So I love that concept of like an open mic, but for keynote speakers or for talks or for workshops as well. Chris, thank you so much for joining. I think, again, I just want to, 18 months ago when you came over to London, and you spent time in our studio. I think it was so fun. I walked away from that couple of days just so inspired. And it was one of those days, if you remember, 4 hours in our studio and you're just riffing and answering those questions and going back and forth with a couple of people. And I certainly walked away super inspired. Are you coming back to London anytime soon?
I don't have concrete plans yet, but London is one of those places where I don't have to plan it; it'll just happen.
Cool.
I've probably been to London more than any other place outside of the U.S.
Okay, nice. Yeah, and again, just seeing so many people just, sitting there and just waiting and so enthusiastic just to kind of, listen to your kind of guidance. Just and again, I met so many people who've continued to be friends with them, like Ivy and Annalise and just kind of continue to have conversations with them. So it's fantastic. It's all down to that kind of that weekend and that spark of people that you kind of brought together for us as well.
That's
Um,
fantastic to hear.
yeah, and hopefully we can do it again. Hopefully we can
Yeah,
do it again.
absolutely. I would love to do it.
Amazing. Chris, thank you so much. All the best. Obviously, I'll continue to follow. Everyone knows kind of where to reach you, but I'll kind of add all the links in as well. So I just want to say, yeah, thank you. I look forward to kind of seeing where everything goes. I'll obviously continue to follow, and I'll share some of the stuff that I'm working with as well with you
Fantastic.
very soon. All right. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of I guess the rest of your evening.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Speak soon.